This is part 2 of an introduction to a low FODMAP diet. This presentation will include application and implementation in pediatrics. To review a low FODMAP diet, it is a temporary elimination of fermentable oligo, di, and monosaccharides, as well as polyols. These are short-chain carbohydrates that are considered FODMAPs due to their high osmotic activity, rapid fermentation, and poor absorption. It involves reducing the consumption of FODMAPs until symptoms significantly subside and then gradually reintroducing FODMAPs. Individuals must be followed for tolerance, and a multidisciplinary approach is required in order to individualize the reintroduction phase. Prior to implementation, the individual should be assessed. A 24-hour diet recall should be conducted in order to gain perspective on the amount and frequency of FODMAPs in the individual's current diet. It's also important to get an idea of their meal patterns, types of foods they're consuming, and if they're taking any supplements. Sometimes supplements can contain high FODMAP ingredients, for example, chicory root and inulin. The patient should also report any known foods that already cause GI distress. The amount of caffeine and fat in the diet should also be evaluated, since these can be common GI irritants. The patient should be referred to an RD for education, implementation, and the reintroduction phase and monitoring and evaluation of this specific diet. For implementation, the patient should trial a low FODMAP diet to see if they experience a reduction in symptoms for about 2 to 6 weeks. It's important to have the patient keep a food and symptom diary or journal throughout the process in order to correlate specific foods with GI distress. If there's no resolution in symptoms during this time, this may signify further restriction of FODMAPs is necessary, or further evaluation of the patient's diet is necessary. As found in research discussed in Part 1, not all participants will respond to a low FODMAP diet. The reintroduction of FODMAPs is highly individualized. This phase will help to identify personal triggers and facilitate expansion of the patient's diet. The patient should continue with the food and symptom diary or journal, especially during the reintroduction phase. A small portion of food from one category should be reintroduced once daily for 3 days, and the patient should monitor and record any symptoms. If symptoms occur, patient should return to a low FODMAP diet until symptoms resolve. If patient experiences no symptoms, they can re-challenge by introducing a different food from that same FODMAP category or move on to a different category. Re-challenging the same category will ensure that this category is not a trigger. This decision may be personal preference or based on the dietitian's preference. The patient should be working with the dietitian to develop a personalized reintroduction schedule. This is an example of a reintroduction schedule. The patient should be made aware that some FODMAP foods fall into more than one category and that these foods should not be used during the reintroduction phase due to the inability to correlate symptoms with specific categories. For example, apples are high in fructose, which is a monosaccharide, but also high in polyols. So this example shows 3-day cycles, introducing garlic, which is an oligosaccharide, and then in the next 3 days, introducing dried apricots, which are polyols, and recording any symptoms if they occur. If they were to occur, the patient would resort back to a 3-day low FODMAP diet following those symptoms until they subside. Throughout the elimination and reintroduction phase, patients' nutritional and health status should be monitored. The food and symptom diary or journal will evaluate adherence to the diet, as well as a 24-hour food recall. Any GI distress should be evaluated, as well as changes in weight and height. Labs should also be monitored for any nutritional deficiencies, especially if the elimination phase is prolonged due to GI distress during reintroduction. A low FODMAP diet is not a complete elimination of all FODMAPs. It involves limiting portion sizes and reducing the amount of FODMAPs consumed. Ongoing elimination of foods that do not impact GI symptoms will result in altered nutrition status. The goals of a low FODMAP diet include limiting one FODMAP-friendly fruit at each meal, avoiding any foods that are already known to cause GI distress, ensuring nutritional adequacy throughout all phases of the diet, and to normalize eating patterns and ensure that there is variety in the diet. Explaining a low FODMAP diet can be overwhelming to a pediatric population and their parents. It is important that they understand that there are certain categories of carbohydrates that have been found to cause GI irritation, and that the reduction of these carbohydrates in the diet could help to improve symptoms of IBS. However, they are not the cause of IBS. Assure the patient and parents that there are still plenty of foods that they can have that will temporarily make up an adequate diet for their child. Encourage them to meet with a pediatric dietitian or dietitian that specializes in low FODMAP diets for proper education and individualization of the diet. This chart lists foods that are high in specific FODMAP categories. These foods should be temporarily reduced or eliminated from the diet. Take note of some of the foods that fall into more than one category, specifically the fruits and vegetables. So, what foods can a patient have during the reintroduction of FODMAPs? This slide provides some examples from each food group. All animal proteins are low in FODMAPs. Nuts, for the exception of cashews and pistachios, along with their associated nut butters, are acceptable as well. Gluten and wheat-free grains are also low in FODMAP content. A good rule of thumb for aged cheeses is to read the food label. You can check for any FODMAP ingredients in the ingredients list, and also look for the sugar content. If the sugar content of hard cheeses is anything greater than 0 grams, it may cause some GI distress. But again, this will vary from person to person. This is an additional chart listing foods that are low in FODMAPs. It's important that patients and their families are able to properly read food labels and be able to identify high FODMAP food ingredients in the ingredients list. This chart shows a list of common FODMAP ingredients that would be found in the ingredients list of some foods. So some popular ingredients that may be found would be, of course, fructose, high fructose corn syrup, honey, It's important to provide resources to patients and their families. Here are a few resources that provide low FODMAP recipes as well as sample meal plans. Some apps that may also be helpful for grocery shopping. The Monash University app was shown in the brief video during the first presentation. However, this app may be costly for some. A free alternate option is Shopwell. Shopwell is an app that allows the user to plug in their dietary restrictions. The user can then scan barcodes of the food item, and the app will alert the user if the item is okay per dietary restrictions chosen. If it's not, the app will give alternate options as well. Implementing an elimination diet, even when temporary, has several limitations in the pediatric population. This is a strict elimination diet. Restrictive diets may eliminate staple foods from a child's diet. This will be difficult to find alternate options, especially among picky eaters. Another consideration that must be made is the impact of an elimination diet on growth. Since this is a temporary 2 to 6 week elimination diet, growth should not be affected. However, ongoing prolonged elimination, particularly of sources of vitamin D and calcium, should be closely monitored. Restrictive diets can also lead to weight loss, fear of eating, nutritional deficiencies, and the development of disordered eating or eating disorders. This diet also restricts 2 prebiotics, inulin and fructooligosaccharides. The possibility of bacterial overgrowth should be considered, as this may initiate an inflammatory response and counteract the diet. Supplementation and the use of fortified products may be necessary based on outcomes of FODMAP tolerances or intolerances for long term. A few nutrients of concern for this age group are B vitamins, iron, protein, folate, and fiber, which would be reduced from the reduction or elimination of wheat, barley, and rye, which are the grain products. Also, vitamin D, calcium, and protein from the reduction or removal of cow's milk from the diet. A registered dietitian is crucial for proper diet education and implementation in order to prevent nutritional deficiencies, stunning of growth, and to aid in the development or continuation of healthy eating patterns. A low FODMAP diet is also highly individualized. An RD will be able to work with the patient and their family to develop an ongoing tailored plan for the reintroduction of FODMAPs. This concludes the 2-part series. If you would like to pause the video for a moment and test your knowledge, you may do so. The answers will be provided on the next slide, and additional information along with the PowerPoint slides will be linked in the description box below.